And we'll actually touch upon the digital transformation that has taken place in the business world itself. And also, to talk about this, we thought of bringing on an expert. Now, he has a slew of titles. I'm going to rattle them off before I'm going to introduce him. He's the co-founder of HubPoint Global. He's a visiting lecturer at Sri Lanka University, and he's actually functioning as a corporate consultant and trainer. And he's none other than Thasim Rafi. Rafi, Mr. Rafi, great to have you on.
Pleasure.
In the studio. Now, of course, I mentioned you were an expert on this field. So, talking about, at first, we'll focus on the marketing industry. Now, marketing has been, there's traditional marketing that has been the consistent basis for a very long time. And since the new millennium, we've seen a shift. Can you actually speak about this shift?
Okay. Yeah, so first of all, thank you for having me here. It's a pleasure to actually share my knowledge with everyone who's watching. So if you talk about marketing, you see, marketing has traditionally been evolved around, TV, television, and radio, and so so what we're seeing is there's a shift in the last decade. So there's been a shift. So things are moving towards digital. So digital can get a bit confusing. People are like, what exactly is digital? So digital marketing mainly focuses on social media marketing and email marketing, and you have SEO, search engine optimization, search engine marketing. So these are the four main key elements of digital marketing. So if you look at digital marketing, globally, right? There is a big shift towards digital marketing. Most companies, if you see companies like Apple and Amazon, both these companies are valued at more than $1 trillion, and both these companies are actually tech companies. So So digital marketing is different from digital transformation. So digital transformation is also happening at a rapid pace globally, and in Sri Lanka as well. So I actually wanted to talk about, let me talk about Sri Lanka first. What's happening in Sri Lanka in terms of digital transformation, then I'll talk about globally. So if you look at Sri Lanka, in the last 5 years, for example, let's say you want to start a business 5 years ago. It would have been a very difficult process, right? You have to just probably sit in a desktop and go through all the paperwork. But now, I actually read an article last week where a global CEO, he's running a $145 billion business purely using his smartphone. So what he's doing is that using his iPhone, he's running the entire business. So his digital marketing campaigns, he looks at his emails. But what can you not do with a smartphone? You can look at PDF documents, download everything. So that's how much smartphones have actually influenced business these days. So, if you look at Sri Lanka's mobile phone SIM card penetration, it stands at more than 137%. So we have 137%, so that's SIM card penetration. And Sri Lanka has one of the fastest and cheapest mobile data in South Asia. So what I'm saying is that it's much more easier for a young entrepreneur to start a business than it was, let's say, 5 years ago. And on top of that, digital marketing has actually influenced that as well. According to statistics, there are more than 7 million active internet users in Sri Lanka. So that's around 30 to 35% of the population. And social media, people who are actively on social media, mainly on Facebook, that's around 6 million people. So we're looking at a huge number of people, who are actively using social media. And that's actually a good medium for people to market, and that's a good segment to target as well, that particular population.
Yeah, like you said a very interesting thing now, the iPhone scenario. Yes. The resource, whatever resource is what it is by the way you use it, exactly. Right? Now, of course, you also mentioned 4 categories of marketing.
Yes.
Now, also, we have heard of different strategies of marketing. There might be product placements, there might be native advertisements. Can you expand into these areas, the strategies used in marketing?
Okay, so basically, if you look at native marketing, is mainly into, like I said earlier, television and radios. That's been the average form of marketing that's been used in the last couple of decades, or even before that. So, like I said, there is actually a trend that is moving towards digital marketing, but for television channels as well, I think a lot of television channels are looking at digital transformation as well, digital marketing. So sort of like promoting their channel mainly on social media channels. So I think mainly on Facebook. So I think that is really a good way to go forward in that particular area. So like I said, marketing channels, the paradigms have changed, and it's So like I said, it's much more easy, and people really have to look into social media a lot if they really want to go. So to answer your question, I think social media marketing is absolutely essential, because like I said, the cream of the population and a lot of people are moving towards that gradually.
That's pretty interesting. And also, now talking about the strategy in Sri Lanka, you mentioned that a lot of strategies can be implemented. Compared to the rest of the region, South Asian region, what are we doing differently, and what can we do to actually maybe catch up, or what are we doing better from South Asia?
Right, so that's a good question. I mean, I recently wrote an article on the South Asian brand on Daily FD. So I mainly focused on 7 points, but I'll just give you a brief about 3 points. There are 3 crucial points that I mentioned, that I talked about. So one point was, I mentioned about cross-tourism. So cross-tourism basically means, and for example, the tourism industry is an industry that definitely needs digital transformation. Because if you look at the tourism industry, it's an industry that is booming, and especially Sri Lanka. So I think what we can do is, we use a lot of brochures and all of that, but I think a lot of tourists would actually prefer if we have digital means. For example, if we have something, apps, if we can upload apps in the Sri Lanka tourism. I mean, these are areas that we can definitely look into. So talk about the, so another point that I mentioned in my article was, I mentioned about joint investment, about how South Asia can get together, something like the ASEAN, the Southeast Asian countries are performing, and something like the EU. What we can do is, if we can get together and propose something together jointly, and if we use digital transformation to do that, I think we can really go forward. And another area that I mentioned was, I mentioned about how we can have a joint visa system, something like the Schengen visa for South Asia. I mean, it's not impossible, and we can work on that. So to talk about other South Asian countries, if you look at India, India is, I think, one of the market leaders globally in terms of how they have transformed digitally. India has come from, they were ranked 144 in the ease of doing business, I think 5 years ago. So now they are number 77 because of digital transformation.
And the telecommunication industry had a pretty...
Telecommunication industry is going through a rapid change. I mean, we were looking at Mukesh Ambani's Jio, and what he's doing is amazing. So they launched 3 years ago, and now they have almost 350 million customers. They're number 2. So basically, India is doing it really well. And another country that I want to talk about in South Asia is Bangladesh. So Bangladesh is leading in the tech industry, and they currently have around 600,000 IT freelancers out there. So Bangladesh is driving the tech revolution in South Asia. And at the same time, Bangladesh export garments, they're the second largest in the world, and their economy is growing at 8%. So a lot of these South Asian countries are doing well. I mean, if you look at Sri Lanka, according to research, according to McKinsey, Sri Lanka was, the average was 33 points. Sri Lanka is on 35. So we are 2 points ahead of the global average in terms of digital transformation. But I think still we're lagging behind countries compared to Bangladesh and India, because they're doing it in a different scale. But I think we can do a lot in that sector. Another point I wanted to mention is, what we can do is, digital transformation will actually, in state-owned enterprises, is a must. Because when we go to government digital, we see a lot of files stacked up. So if we can digitize everything, and if we can make make this go online, I think what we can do is, we can save a lot of paper, and with global warming coming up and causing real effects, I think this is all something that we seriously have to look into. And digitizing state-owned enterprises, for example, and public service. And this is an area that we can definitely look into. And India, I think, proposed a digital identity card, but I think it didn't really work out there. But that's something that we can definitely look into.
Ease of doing business is something that's key, right? Every business. Now, of course, you have a global experience. You've been in the West. I think those guys are eons ahead, and that's what we should be aiming for. But meanwhile, have realistic goals, like in the South Asian region. Now, talking about a startup or a SME getting into the market, what should be the ideal business practice be? Because in those cases, they can actually adopt the business practices of the West as well.
Yes.
So with your experiences, what do you see that to be?
Okay, so if you look at Sri Lanka's startup industry, I think it's going through a boom. Because I think in 2019 alone, there are more than, I think, 2,000 startups in Sri Lanka. So the startup industry is going through a rapid transformation, and there's a lot of companies who are starting, especially in the IT industry, e-commerce, digital marketing. So I'm one of them. So I think the startup industry is going through a major transformation. And there's a lot, I mean, digital transformation and startups go hand in hand. So the reason I'm saying this is because, like I explained earlier, smartphones. So a lot of startups are finding it easier to start a business than before. Because now if you have, like I said earlier, Sri Lanka has very cheap mobile data. So I mean, like what we can do is, ease of doing business for startups has dramatically changed due to digital transformation. And digital transformation has actually enabled that. And also to reach the people, in marketing wise, social media marketing is much more cost effective. It's very cheap. I mean, social media marketing with $5 you can reach around 50,000 people in Sri Lanka. I mean, when you boost your post. So there is immense potential in that particular area. And also another point I want to mention is influencer. There's something called influencer marketing, which is coming up, I think, globally and in Sri Lanka. So influencer marketing is basically different from celebrity marketing. Influencer marketing is basically anyone who has a good Instagram profile can actually get around 10 to 15,000 followers, and then they can start actually marketing. So so main benefit of influencer marketing is that it's actually cheap, and the reach is massive. And to give a real life example, I wanted to try influencer marketing. So what I did was I brought down 5 Instagram bloggers from Dubai. I had a friend in Dubai. I brought them down. I got them stays at 5-star hotels after talking to them. So they have reach of around 60,000 Instagram followers. So what they did was they came to Sri Lanka and they said Sri Lanka is amazing, Sri Lanka is great, and they started blogging about Sri Lanka. So what happened was we initially sort of started to get recognized globally, and this was like a couple of years ago. So that's a good example of influencer marketing and how it is affecting Sri Lanka. So
there are so many avenues to explore. I think exactly. Those are very good thing you did for Sri Lanka. Yes. Just to test the crowd for Sri Lanka. And also talking about the ideal practices. Now we talked about the ideal practices of the marketing industry and the digital transformation platform. Now what can a government or a policy institution do to actually facilitate and grow, actually make sure this industry gets nurtured and grow?
Okay, so digital transformation. Okay, I think the state has a key role to play in digital transformation. Because earlier I gave the example of India and Bangladesh. So India and Bangladesh, the state plays a key role in digital transformation. I think if we have a good public sector and a private sector collaboration, I think there's a lot we can do. So that I think we should start off with that. And as a government, I think we are trying to give incentives for the IT industry as well in tax concessions. So I think that is an area that definitely must be looked into. So the state can play a major role in digital transformation, and I think with 2020, so I think it must be a clear policy for them to really look into digital transformation, especially in the state-owned enterprises. They're really going forward, and I think the private sector is pretty much getting there in Sri Lanka. Digital transformation is happening. For example, where I lecture at the University of Sri Lanka, I'm lecturing on digital marketing. So in our particular faculty, we don't use paper at all. Even assignments, we give it purely online on digital platforms. So I think that is a way to really go forward, because then we're looking at using less paper and benefiting out of that as well. And like I said, there's a lot of benefits out of that. So especially in regards to global warming.
Something very interesting to look into. And of course, a very interesting topic. I think we can discuss at length about this. But at this time, we have to close out the program. Thank you for joining us, Thasim.
Thank you very much.
Rafi, that was great.
Thank you very much.
Had some really interesting points. So if you are looking at a small or medium enterprise, or even if it's an established business, maybe look into digital transformation and maybe look into digital marketing. Something very interesting. With that, we will wind up today's edition of Business Today. Thank you for joining us. Do join us next time.